This is Donna Otto with the South Texas Border Chapter, Texas Master Naturalist. We were delayed a few minutes trying to get onto Facebook. We're going to proceed with our presenter tonight, who's Mr. Bill Rich. He's going to be talking about passion flower vines. Bill is a member of our class of 2022, and he did complete certification, so he is now an official member uh, with all the pins and responsibilities that go along with being a full member. Originally from South Louisiana, he's lived in the valley for nearly 50 years. His wife is a valley native, and his two children were born here. Bill is an enthusiastic observer of nature. He loves to learn and is a good teacher. While Bill is new to the Texas Master Naturalists, he has been a member of our sister group, the Texas Master Gardeners, for several years. He has done several presentations and workshops for that group. Bill's current passions are gardening, the preservation of native species, and Korean soap operas, not necessarily in that order. His talk tonight combines two of those passions, gardening and the preservation of native species. The title of his presentation is The Passion Vine Diaries. And so go ahead, Bill. We're ready for your program.
Okay, Joseph, I'm going to go ahead and try to share.
Okay. Looks good.
Looks good. Okay. Y'all ready?
Yes.
Okay. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a story. It's called The Passion Vine Diaries. It's my story of 3 years of green vines, pink flowers, orange butterflies, giant bees, spiky caterpillars, ant police, and a killer stink bug. Over the next hour, I'm going to share with you the adventures that I had and the discoveries that I made as I learned about growing passion vines in my garden. But before we get started, let me take a couple of minutes to tell you why I am doing this. It is my mission to see everyone use native plants in their home gardens and in urban landscaping in general. For many people, the only plants that they consider for their gardens are the ones that they see at the garden center at their local big box store. The retail sale of plants here in the Rio Grande Valley is dominated by a few large corporations with thousands of stores nationwide. The sale of garden plants for them is a very small part of their total sales. These giant companies buy plants in massive quantities from large commercial nurseries. To minimize the cost per unit, they limit the number of different kinds of plants that they sell. It would not be cost effective for them to tailor the kinds of plants sold in each region of the country to only plants that are known to do well in that region. With few exceptions, they sell the same plants in all their stores. The plants that they sell in the Rio Grande Valley are the same ones that they sell in their garden centers in Memphis, Tennessee, and in Buffalo, New York. And as you might imagine, the growing conditions in upstate New York are very different from those in South Texas. These companies market their plants to a customer base that is, by and large, made up of people who don't have a great deal of gardening knowledge. These are people whose evaluation of a plant's worthiness is frequently limited to how pretty its flowers are. They naively assume that if a plant is sold locally, it will grow locally. Look at the yellow sign at the bottom of the picture. The sign tells the buyer that this plant needs 6 hours or more of sun every day. Now, 6 hours of sun might be okay for a newly planted flower in Buffalo, New York in July. Not so good for the Rio Grande Valley in July, which is when this photo was taken. I'm not saying that it is impossible to grow these plants in the Rio Grande Valley in July. I'm saying that if an amateur gardener plants these flowers in the middle of the summer, where every day they get a full dose of South Texas sun, they will be hard-pressed to keep them alive until September. I am a gardening enthusiast. My wife is not. She is, however, enamored of the pretty flowers at the garden center. These are snapdragons. A few months ago, my wife saw some snapdragons at the garden center. She liked the pretty flowers and insisted that we get some for our yard. We bought 6. Snapdragons as a species originated in the Mediterranean areas of Spain and Italy. I think it is safe to say that the climate of the Rio Grande Valley, with its broiling hot summers and sparse rainfall, is a far cry from the cooler, wetter climes of Spain and Italy. This is what those snapdragon plants look like a couple of months later. Snapdragons and South Texas summers are not a good match. The yellowing in the leaves is a condition known as chlorosis. Chlorosis occurs when the soil is too alkaline for plants to properly absorb nutrients. They needed a more acid soil. One might say they needed battery acid, but were getting Clorox. There are ways to acidify the soil, but they cost money, require frequent retreatment, and don't always work. Now, wouldn't it be easier to grow plants that are better adapted to the climate and soils of South Texas? Look at the other plants in the picture. They are native plants called Indian Heliotropes. Only inches away from the snapdragons, they are thriving. This plant has adapted to the physical conditions of South Texas, Clorox soils, and high temperatures. In the same bed with the snapdragons and the Indian Heliotropes is another native plant called a moonflower. I took this picture of my moonflower in mid-July when daily high temperatures were in triple digits. I included its scientific name so that if you want to look it up on the internet, you won't confuse it with something called a moonflower vine, which has similar flowers, but is a completely different plant. Now, why don't people use native plants in their gardens? Well, they don't know anything about native plants. For most amateur gardeners, the plants that they know are the ones that they have seen at their local garden center. There's a strong need to educate the public about native plants. They don't understand how important native plants are to the health of local ecologies. That goes for all of us as well. By the end of this presentation, each of you will have a better understanding of the importance of native plants to the overall health of the ecology of your own neighborhood. They don't know where to buy native plants. There are few, if any, native plants at local garden centers. And while there are sources where people can buy native plants, they are not well known to the public. What are some of the advantages of native plants over garden center plants? They're unique. How many of our neighbors has ever seen a moonflower plant with its bright green foliage and spectacular white flowers? They're better suited to withstand climate change. Within a few years, it will be much hotter. Water will be rationed and cost a lot more. And it may be sooner than you think. In spite of the rain that we've had the last couple of days, 2 weeks ago, the city of McAllen went on stage 2 water restrictions after it was reported that the water levels at Falcon and Amistad reservoirs had fallen to less than 25% capacity. Native plants are easier to grow and less expensive to maintain. They don't need chemical fertilizers or soil conditioners. And of course, they don't need to be watered as often. They augment local ecosystems. Our native habitats are disappearing. And while we can't wave our magic wands to change farmland and shopping centers back to their original status, we should do everything we can to save our native plant species. Many native plants bloom in the summer. As I look around my neighborhood on a blistering hot August day, there's almost nothing blooming other than plants that are native or adaptive. The native flowers in my yard are all blooming: velvet lantana, Indian heliotropes, frog fruit, moonflowers, and of course, passion flowers. Native plants attract interesting creatures that can be more of an attraction than the plant itself. I have a patch of palm leaf mist flowers at the corner of my yard where the street meets the alley. Queen butterflies love them. One day, as I was working in my yard, a woman stopped her car, rolled down her window, and said to me, "You know, a lot of people in the neighborhood call you the butterfly man." This is what she was talking about. To be truthful, the palm leaf mist flower is not actually native to the Rio Grande Valley, but its value to a native species like the queen butterfly makes me feel that it should be acceptable as an honorary native plant. Tonight's objectives, it's about you. I want you to see that there is much more to native plants than just the plants themselves. An individual plant is only one piece of the mosaic of plants and animals, climate and soil that create an ecosystem. The beauty of an ecosystem cannot be fully appreciated when you are only looking at one of its parts. Tonight's presentation will give you a better understanding of how plants and animals depend on one another to survive and to thrive. I want you to see how a native plant can change over the course of a single year and over the course of its entire life. Plants go through cycles, both seasonal and throughout their existence. Understanding their stages of growth or simply acknowledging that there are different stages of growth will help you to grow as a conservation-conscious master naturalist. Last, I want you to promote the use of native plants in urban landscaping and in home gardens in your community. I want you to see how you can have fantastic native plants in your gardens, how easy it is to grow them, how much fun they are, and how growing them gives you a better understanding of the natural world. Then I want you to use your knowledge of native plants to promote their use by your neighbors and by the public at large. As you are listening to my story, think about how important the plants you see are to other organisms. Observe that even though these plants are in an urban setting far from where they originally came from, they are able to summon elements of the ecosystems of their native habitats. Well, that ends my sales pitch, so now it's time for me to tell you my story. All passion vines are of the genus Passiflora. There are many kinds growing in the tropical and subtropical areas of the Western Hemisphere. I am not going to subject you to a scholarly dissertation of all the different kinds of passion vines. I'm only going to tell you about the 3 kinds that I have in my gardens, and they are Biflora, Corky stem, and either Fetida or Ciliata. The first is called Biflora. It is not a native plant. However, it does have a surprising link to a native creature. Look at the Biflora leaf in the picture on the right. You see anything odd about it? It appears to have been 2 leaves that at some time in its history combined to become one. And look at the yellow dots on the leaf. You might think that there's some sort of insect damage. No, the dots are natural. All of Biflora's leaves have them. The reason for the yellow dots is ants. My Biflora has lots of little black ants scurrying up and down its vines. When my wife first saw the ants, she wanted me to spray the vines and kill them before they damaged the plant. I didn't spray them because I knew the truth. The ants are Biflora's protection squad. They attack anything that tries to eat the plant. Now you're probably thinking, why would they do that? They do it because Biflora is paying them to do it. The little yellow dots are repositories for tiny drops of nectar that the ants drink. So the ants aren't protecting the Biflora. They're protecting their food source. Anything that attacks Biflora's leaves is attacking their food supply. Access to the nectar repositories is on the underside of the leaf. So after a hard day patrolling the vines, Biflora's ant police belly up to the nectar bar. The little black ants patrol up and down the vines, and every once in a while they stop at a nectar pub for a sweet, refreshing pick-me-up. I read somewhere that a researcher in Costa Rica found 15 different species of protector ants on a single passion vine. Now, Biflora is the only one of my passion vines that have ant police. My second passion vine is the Corky stem passion vine. A true native plant, the Corky stem passion vine has a little green flower about the size of a silver dime. Because of their drab, undersized flowers, Corkies are less popular in gardens than passion vines with larger, more colorful flowers. And you might be wondering why it is called a Corky stem passion vine. That is because its stems resemble the bark of a cork tree. Now, while the Corky doesn't have pretty flowers, at least it has a cute name. Or it used to have a cute name. You see, a while back, the people who named plants decided that the Corky stem passion vine growing here and one growing on some island in the Caribbean are not the same plant. So they let the Caribbean version keep the name Corky stem and change the name of ours to the pale passion vine. I don't know about you, but I think we got gypped. But for the sake of tradition, I will continue to call mine a Corky stem, at least until the plant taxonomy police show up at my door. Pale passion vine. The fruit of the passion vine, formerly known as the Corky stem passion vine, is a green ball about the size of a marble that turns purplish black as it matures. Its juice, while sweet, is only marginally palatable. Trust me, I know. The final passion vine in my garden is the one that we most readily recognize as a true native passion vine. Or is it? My beloved stinking passion vine. This is my favorite and the one that I will be talking about the most. And the crazy thing is that I'm not sure what it is. I have an ongoing debate with my friend Matt Coleman about just what this plant is. I say that it is a man-made variation of our native fetida passion vine. Matt says that it is not fetida at all, but a different species known as Biflora ciliata. What Matt and I do agree on is that what I have is not the true local native passion vine. By the way, fetida is the Latin word for stinky. It is said that if you tear off a leaf, crush it between your fingers, hold it to your nose, and then sniff it, it has an unpleasant odor. I've never done that, so I don't know. It seems like the waste of a perfectly good leaf. The flowers on my passion vine have a faint, sweet smell, and the uncrushed leaves have no smell at all. The flowers of the true native fetida are whitish purple in color. The flowers on my vines, as you can see, are pink, and its fruit is bright red. The fruit of my passion vine starts off green, darkens, and then turns red. They are thin-skinned hollow balls with some seeds in them. Now, move along. This isn't the passion fruit you're looking for. Nothing edible here. The fruit of the true native fetida remains green through maturity. Okay, time out for a special message. I have recently found evidence that my friend Matt is right and that my vines are indeed Biflora ciliata, which is not truly native to the Rio Grande Valley. It's actually native to Webb County. And who would have guessed that Laredo is home to a native passion vine? Now, it was somewhat unnerving that only a week before I was to give a speech about native plants, I discovered that the star of the show isn't a native plant. I spoke to Matt, and he said not to be overly concerned. He told me that this is one of those gray areas when it comes to native plants. Nearby natives function just as well as true natives in the ecosystem, and the food web should be acceptable as long as they don't become invasive and start forcing out their true native counterparts. He went on to say that plants that we really want to avoid are the non-native plants that contribute nothing to the web of life around them, thus making them ecological dead ends. My story begins in the fall of 2019 when I drove to Mike Heap's native plant nursery in Harlingen, where I purchased 3 passion vines. I planted them in front of the wooden fence under the big ebony tree near the circular drive. To give them something to climb, I attached some wire fencing material to the wooden fence. Then I waited, and I waited, and I waited. After several months of them doing nothing, I suspected that the plants were duds, and it was all over before I even started. Then in February 2020, one of them started to grow, and then it had a little shoot. The other two still did nothing. Eventually, very slowly, all three vines started sending out tendrils and began to climb the wire fencing. By the middle of March, one of the vines had reached the top of the fence. I had wanted passion vines that were so thick the fence would be hidden by a solid wall of green foliage. What I got was 3 or 4 individual vines that, to tell you the truth, looked kind of scrawny. It had been 6 months since I planted those passion vines, and these pitiful, skinny vines were all that I had to show for my efforts. I was disappointed. And then one morning, when I went out to see them, I saw that something wonderful had happened. There was a flower, a beautiful pink flower. Then the next day, there was another flower, and then 1 or 2 flowers every day. And then one day, there were 4 together. As May turned into June, the vines grew faster and made more and more of the pretty pink flowers. Now, the flowers were nice, but I wanted more. I wanted to see the pretty butterflies that laid their eggs on passion vines. In particular, I wanted to see a certain butterfly from a group called fritillaries. More specifically, I wanted to see the spectacular, insanely brilliant orange Gulf fritillary. I thought that having a local population of Gulf fritillaries based in my yard would justify all the work that I had put into caring for my passion vines. By the way, if you think that a Gulf fritillary is pretty from the top, check out the underside of its wings. That's gorgeous. That is a gorgeous butterfly. Well, I kept hoping that one would come. And then one day, one came to my vines. A Gulf fritillary fluttered around, inspected the leaves of my passion vines, decided that they were acceptable, and laid her eggs. Or as the butterfly people would say, she oviposited. In the ensuing weeks, more Gulf fritillaries arrived and laid more eggs. As the summer progressed, there was hardly a day that I didn't see 1 or 2 Gulf fritillaries hanging around the vines. It was fun watching the caterpillars happily munching on the passion vine leaves. I just knew it wouldn't be long until I had lots of beautiful orange butterflies sprouting from chrysalises all over my passion vines. I was in heaven. Okay, I want to pause for a minute, pause the story, so we can talk about how Gulf fritillary caterpillars change as they grow. I'm now going to tell you about instars. Fritillary caterpillars shed their skin many times as they grow. Each stage with a new skin is called an instar. The skin of the new instar looks different from the one before it. This is an early instar Gulf fritillary caterpillar 1 or 2 days after hatching. I'm sorry about the fuzzy picture. I'm not the world's greatest photographer. In later instars, they are orange with dark and light colored stripes. Then they become mostly orange, as in the picture on the right. In their last few instars, the Gulf fritillary caterpillar's signature blue and orange stripes become more pronounced. The one on the right is probably in its last instar and will soon go into its chrysalis and turn into a butterfly. The spikes protruding from their bodies are strictly for show. Gulf fritillary caterpillar spines are soft. You can pick them up and hold them in your hand without worry. Okay, enough about instars. Back to our story. Where was I? Oh, yes. To my delight, there were more and more caterpillars on my ciliata as well as on the little Corky stem next to it. That's going to make a lot of pretty butterflies, I thought to myself. Oh, yes, I was in heaven. But soon, my butterfly heaven turned into caterpillar hell. By late summer 2020, The caterpillar population was growing at an alarming rate. There were more caterpillars, and then there were more and more. There were so many that I began to think that my vines had become the scene of an ovipositing orgy. I watched in horror as a vast horde of ravenous worms marauded through the vines, eating the leaves faster than the plants could grow new ones. And then, when they ran short of leaves, oh, horror of horrors, they ate the beautiful pink flowers. And then, to add insult to injury, they ate the flower buds before they could even turn into flowers. And then they ate the fruit. And after they had eaten the leaves and the flowers and the fruit, they ate the tender growing ends of the vines. I was in a panic. I thought maybe I should start picking them off. But I couldn't bring myself to do that. I didn't know what to do. And then one day, there was a ray of hope. Enter the killer stink bug. Meet Apotheticus lineolatus, an insect predator known as the rough-skinned stink bug. Lineolatus grabs its prey, inserts its hollow proboscis into its victim, and sucks out its insides like it's drinking a milkshake through a straw. A caterpillar milkshake, that is. It was really cool. I ran inside to get my wife so she could see it. She said, "Ew," and ran back into the house. But there was only one of these killer stink bugs, and by itself, it wasn't going to solve my problem. Bottom line was that the fritillars are eating the leaves faster than the plant produced them. Pretty soon, I was left with nothing but sticks hanging on a chicken wire fence. Meanwhile, at the Corky stem next door, my poor little Corky stem was likewise being devoured by the orange and blue hordes. It, too, was reduced to sticks. My beautiful passion vines were done for. It was the end. I was very disappointed. In November 2020, caterpillar numbers started going down. Why? Well, maybe it was the onset of cooler weather. Maybe it was because there was nothing left for them to eat. According to iNaturalist, fritillary numbers peak in October and decline rapidly in the late fall and winter. My passion vines, or what was left of them, were safe, at least for the time being. With the end of the caterpillar scourge, the vines were once again able to put on some foliage. New Year's 2021 came and went. Everything was calm. And then, just as I thought things were looking up, they got worse. Much, much worse. On February 16, 2021, the Rio Grande Valley, along with the rest of Texas, suffered the worst spate of sub-freezing temperatures that had been seen in decades. Everything froze. Plants of tropical and subtropical origin were especially hard hit, and that group included passion vines. Both my big ciliata and my little Corky stem were devastated. The better part of 2 years had gone by since I started those vines. And then during that time, my heart had bounced up and down between hope and despair. And now the final blow had been struck. All was lost. It was time to throw in the towel. I chopped down what was left of the vines and tossed them into the compost bin. But of course, I had underestimated Mother Nature. The native plants in the Rio Grande Valley have been around for countless millennia. They were experiencing bouts of freezing temperatures and adapting to them long before the first humans set foot here. In the beginning, they might have died out completely and then repopulated from warmer climes to the south. But I'm convinced that over time, they adapted and became able to survive by growing back from their roots. And so it was with my passion vines, as it was with so many other South Texas native plants. The plant died, but the roots didn't. A few weeks after the freeze, tiny green buds began to appear at the bottoms of the dead vines. I thought maybe, just maybe they might come back. And they did. Not long after the buds appeared, they turned into small shoots. This is a picture of the first shoots from my Corky after the freeze. By the end of March, both the ciliata and the Corky stem were back in business. In April and May, in an explosion of growth, the vines went over the top of the fence and onto the big ebony tree. From there, they cascaded to the ground in a profusion of foliage and flowers. And that brings us to my favorite part of the story. It's about a creature that was so interesting that it became my absolute favorite thing about my passion vines. It was better than the pink flowers. It was better than the orange butterflies. It was even better than the killer stink bug. One morning in early June 2021, my wife and I went into the backyard to admire the passion flowers. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a movement on one of the flowers. I turned to see what it was. It was a bee, a big bee. It was much bigger than a honeybee. Now, it wasn't as large as those big black carpenter bees that you see lumbering around. I mean, those guys are like sumo wrestlers. But it was big. It was the Arnold Schwarzenegger of bees. In the days that followed, we began to see more and more of these oversized bees. I needed to talk to someone who could tell me what kind of bees they were. And as luck would have it, I had been assisting a graduate student who was doing a survey of South Texas bees. To help him further his project, I had volunteered to let him periodically set up bee traps in our front yard. My bee expert's name was Ernest Herrera. That's right. It was the same Ernest Herrera who we all know as our favorite reptile and amphibian expert. I took some pictures of the bees and texted them to Ernest. He told me that they were a native species called Mexican feather-tongued bees. A feather-tongued bee. A Mexican feather-tongued bee. That was a new one on me. But boy, those bees really liked my passion flowers. My wife and I immediately fell in love with them. Now, I must note here that I recently read an article that Anita Westervelt wrote a couple of years ago. In it, she talks about taking pictures of honeybees on a passion flower, and suddenly something that she described as being like a B-52 bomber flew over her shoulder and landed on the flower with the honeybee. It was a feather-tongued bee. I think that Anita would agree with my wife and me that they make quite an impression on you the first time that you see them. My wife and I went out every morning to see the bee and flower show. As I watched the bees at work, I began to think about how this passion flower and the Mexican feather-tongued bee benefited each other. Now let's take another break from the story, excuse me, and look more closely at this relationship. First, let's look at the passion flower. We all know that bees spread pollen between flowers. A plant's pollen is located in or on its anthers, which on a passion flower are these 5 rectangular structures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You might call them the passion flower's pollen stamp pads. Pollen must be transferred to the stigmas, which are these 3 round structures. The stigmas conduct the pollen to the ovary, which is where the fruit is created. A passion flower's anthers and stigmas are downward facing. Therefore, pollen collection and transfer to the stigmas must be accomplished from underneath. The passion flower's nectar is at the center of the flower. Now that we have seen the flower, let's design a bee that would be the perfect pollinator for this passion flower. What should the ideal passion flower pollinator bee look like? Well, it should be big enough that its back rubs against the pollen pads and the stigmas. A passion flower's anther pads sent high up off the flower. Our ideal bee needs to be big enough that it rubs against them while it drinks nectar from the center of the flower. It should have a furry back that will hold the pollen in its hairs. Honeybees have furry hind legs to hold pollen. Because the passionflower's pollen pads face downward, let's give our ideal bee some thick fur on its back to hold the pollen. Well, it's not enough for it to have a furry back. Let's put a big furry hump on its back. A hump will make the bee's back higher, improving its contact with the anther pads. Let's have it go completely around the flower. And that way it'll come in contact with more anther pads as well as more of the round stigmas. And there should be many of these bees so that pollination of the flower occurs repeatedly. The more bees that visit an individual flower, the higher will be the probability that the flower will be successfully pollinated. So what does our perfect passion flower pollinator bee look like? No, this isn't the perfect passion flower pollinator bee. This little honeybee is dwarfed by the passion flower structures. It is definitely not the best bee to pollinate this passion flower. The bee that we're looking for should be able to collect pollen from the anther pads, deposit it on the stigmas, and drink nectar from the center of the flower, all at the same time. And the one that can do all of these things, our perfect passion flower pollinator bee, is, of course, the Mexican feather-tongued bee. If you look closely, you can see her furry hump covered with pollen that she has scraped off the anther pads. Now let's watch our perfect pollinator bee in action as she dances around the passion flowers, drinking nectar and collecting pollen. You can see the anthers and the stigmas move as she brushes her back against them. Towards the end, you'll see something that shares this passion vine with the bees. The last item on the perfect pollinator list says that the probability of successful pollination is increased when the flower is visited multiple times by multiple bees. That is exactly what happens when our bee visits the passion flowers with a few of her friends. And of course, once the feather tongues began to visit my passion vines, instead of the flowers making only an occasional fruit, there was so much fruit that the vines began to look like they had strings of red Christmas ornaments hanging from them. You are looking at a picture of pollination efficiency. Every one of those red balls was once a flower. Imagine that the rate of successful pollination of the flowers on this section of vine was well over 80%. Now, as we have seen, the Mexican feather-tongued bee has adaptations that make it a highly efficient pollinator of passion flowers. And the passion vine itself has adaptations that favor the big bees. Let's say hypothetically that a swarm of little honeybees beats the feather tongues to the passion flowers. Well, they might take all the nectar and be too small to be efficient pollinators. So if you're a passion vine, you want the bees that can best carry your pollen to be the first ones there. And this passion vine has a trick up its sleeve to make sure that the Mexican feather-tongued bees are always the first ones to get to its flowers. Passion flowers open early in the morning while it's still dark. This takes advantage of another special adaptation of the Mexican feather-tongued bee. Low light vision. Did you know that honeybees have 5 eyes? The Mexican feather-tongued bee has extra eyes on the top of its head that allow it to see in very low light. She is out of her burrow and on her way to the passion vines while it is still too dark for any other kind of bee to find its way. Oh, also in this picture, you can clearly see the furry hump on her back on which the pollen grains collect as she goes round and round the flower. The picture of the bee in the previous slide was taken by author and wildlife photographer Paula Sharp. Ms. Sharp was in the valley researching a book that she was writing about South Texas bees. She was at the end of her research and needed one last bee to complete her list. Guess which one it was? Yep, she had been unsuccessful in finding Mexican feather-tongued bees. Finally, she contacted Ernest Herrera, telling him that she had spent weeks driving down nearly every dirt road in 3 counties and spending many long hours trudging through the brush looking for feather-tongued bees. She asked him if he had any idea where she might go to find these elusive creatures. Ernest said, "Sure, just go to Bill Rich's house in McAllen. He's got lots of them." Well, she came to my house early one morning, shot some pictures, and then asked if she could capture one. I said, sure. She was one happy bee lady. By the way, the bee in the jar is the same one that you saw in the previous slide. By late summer 2021, a few Gulf fritillaries had returned. The bees stayed active through most of the fall, but throughout November, the number of flowers began to decline. And as the flowers disappeared, so did the bees. By Thanksgiving, the flowers, the bees, and the butterflies were all gone. By Christmas 2021, the vines had stopped growing, the leaves were darkening, and many were turning yellow. My passion vines, after working so hard all year, were just worn out. In February 2022, I cut away all of the vines, leaving only a few 3 to 4 foot bare stems coming out of the ground. I reasoned that if they had come back so strongly after the freeze, they would do the same thing after simply being cut back. I was right. The vines sprouted and began to grow. But now there was a new problem. Apparently, when the vines stopped growing, the roots hadn't. Those were getting stronger and were busily sending out underground stems called rhizomes, from which new passion vines began to pop up. The brown thing at the bottom of this passion vine volunteer is not a root. It is a piece of a rhizome, an underground stem. These thinner ones are the actual roots created by the new plant. The vines, now 2.5 years old, began sending out rhizomes in all directions. Every few feet, a new passion vine like this one would pop up. Because of the rhizomes, I had passion vine volunteers coming up in my yard as far as 25 feet from the original vines. But as vine growth resumed, the number of new rhizome plants decreased. The emergence of passion vine plants where I didn't want them meant that I had to dig out or cut back vines that were coming up in the adjoining flower beds and in the backyard. It also meant that I could have a few passion vines for my friends. That includes all of you. Call me if you want one. I'll even go to your house to help you plant it and show you how to care for it. It's a way for me to fulfill my goal of promoting the use of native plants in home gardens. And maybe if I'm nice to him, Ronnie will let me have some volunteer hours for doing it. And if we're both really nice to him, maybe he'll let you get some AT hours as well. Hint, hint. My passion vines sit on the island that is the property that my house is on. For native species like the Mexican feather-tongued bees and the Gulf fritillary butterflies to truly prosper, they need additional passion vines in the neighborhood. And that way, instead of having a single island where there would be multiple islands that these creatures could move between. That, I believe, would more closely mimic their natural habitat. Recently, I've noticed an increase in the number of Gulf fritillaries flying around my yard. I believe that the reason for this is that the cultivation of passion vines by two of my neighbors, both of whom are fellow master naturalists, Julia Jorgensen and Katie Krause. Between us, we have created a healthy passion vine corridor for the butterflies and the bees. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that the three of us, Julia, Katie, and I, all have native flowers in our gardens to provide nectar for the butterflies. Well, I have now come to the end of my passion vine story. As I write this, it is mid-May 2022. Every morning, my wife and I camp out in the backyard by the passion vines under the big ebony tree. We drink our coffee, admire the pink passion flowers, and hope to see our first feather-tongued bee of the season. We haven't seen one yet, but we know they'll be back. Are there any questions?
There are some chat comments about that was a great program, and I concur, and several people are saying so. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. We'll
Well,
wait to see if
I do have, you said you wanted an hour, and I have some extras that can fill in the time. I have some questions if they don't.
That's good.
all right. Yeah, go ahead.
First question is that Gulf fritillaries are not the only butterflies that lay their eggs on passion vines. What about the other things? What about the other fritillaries? There's two other kinds. There's the Mexican fritillary and there's the variegated fritillary. And I only saw Mexican fritillaries. I never saw any variegated fritillaries. So these are Mexican fritillaries here. And the one reason I realized that the Mexican and the variegated fritillary didn't use the passion vines is that passion vines is only one of several plants that those two use. So while the Gulf fritillary exclusively uses passion vines, the Mexican fritillary and the variegated fritillary use other plants as well. Now, I only saw one Mexican fritillary on my passion vines, and only saw one Mexican fritillary caterpillar. Now, those are similar in appearance to the certain instars of the Gulf fritillary caterpillars. However, they have a singular distinguishing feature that differentiates them from Gulf fritillaries. They have clubbed antennae. Besides fritillaries, there's another group of butterflies called longwings that use passion vines as their host plant. I have never seen one of these near my passion vines, but it would be a dream come true if any of these beautiful creatures came to my passion vines. Here are some of the exquisite longwings that we have here in the valley. As you might have guessed, these butterflies are also known as heliconians. The zebra and the Julian are more numerous. Rarer longwings are the Irado and the Isabella's heliconian. Beautiful butterflies. And another question, why didn't the caterpillars eat the vines in 2021 and 22? Well, 2021 we had the freeze, so it killed all the butterflies. In 2022, I haven't seen it, hasn't happened. The vines have not been ravaged, and it's not for lack of adult butterflies. The fritillaries are more numerous than ever. My personal theory is that Mother Nature, if left alone, will find a way that brings things back into equilibrium. Increased predation is probably the reason that caterpillar numbers have not exploded this year. But who are the predators? Well, we already know about the killer stink bug. But as we have seen, Lineolatus couldn't stop the horde all by itself. So maybe it was birds. Now, I'm not a bird person, so I don't know if great kiskadees like this one eat caterpillars. I do know that caterpillars are high protein sustenance for the young of many birds. I read that some bird species feed as many as 5,000 worms to their caterpillars and their chicks. Worms and caterpillars to their chicks. I have observed that there are many more birds nesting in the trees in my yard than in the past, and there's a greater variety of species. However, that is only an observation. The increase in bird numbers in the neighborhood could also be due to factors such as the ongoing drought that might be driving them into urban areas. Another possibility is lizards. I've seen these anoles around the passion vines, and even though I have never seen one eat a caterpillar, I doubt that they are off the menu. While researching this, I discovered also that anoles are immune to the toxins present in monarch caterpillars. However, there is one group of creatures that I'm sure are significant caterpillar predators: wasps. The diet of adult wasps is flower nectar, not caterpillars. Wasps do, however, feed caterpillars to their larvae. The wasp in the picture on the right is flying over and under the leaves of the passion vine, hunting for caterpillars. Thank you, Katie. Okay, my last extra is capturing bees for the Texas A&M collection. While I was doing some research on Mexican feather-tongued bees, I came across a listing of the bees in the Texas A&M collection in College Station. It said that the Mexican feather-tongued bee specimens that they had in their collection were added in 1974. I contacted a Texas A&M entomologist that I knew and asked him if the university wanted some new specimens of male and female feather-tongued bees. He contacted the collection curators and they said yes, they definitely wanted them. So he came to my house and caught some bees. As it is difficult to differentiate the sexes while they're buzzing around, he caught 4, one of which we were able to confirm was a male. The extra females were released. He made catching them look easy. It made me feel like all the money that I had spent sending him to college and graduate school was maybe worthwhile investment. And right now, I'm sure that the burning question in your mind is, how can you tell the difference between a male and a female Mexican feather-tongued bees? Well, we've seen this picture of the female, and you see what her face looks like. The face of the male is bright yellow. And Paula Sharp is a much better photographer than I am. And that is the end of the presentation. And by the way, the bees did return. Are there any other questions?
We got a couple more questions, and I'll start with the ones in Facebook. Uh, do you have a wasp problem? She said she's heard they eat the caterpillars.
They especially the paper wasps, and they hunt them. And I didn't want to get gross, but they chew them up into mush and take them back to their larvae. And that I don't have a wasp problem. It's just that the wasps do get them, and I see the wasps flying around, and we have lots of wasps around in here. But well, right, and the valley. It's just one of those things, and it just probably have more now we did before because there are more caterpillars of them to feed their young. Does that answer the question?
Hopefully, it's on Facebook, so they're a little delayed from us.
Okay.
Let's see.
I don't have a specific wasp problem. You just when something's hunting the caterpillars, you just tend to see them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see what we got on here. There was a suggestion you should write a book or an audio book.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Let's see.
Yeah. I will say something, here I am, I'm just a layman. I'm just a guy who grows plants. Well, how the heck do I know so much about these bees? The answer is that you got to remember, I was standing in my driveway for about an hour with the lady who is writing the book, Paula Sharp.
Okay, Anita asked, did your tropical passion vine return after the big freeze?
You're talking about the Biflora? The Biflora, I got the Biflora after
Yes.
the freeze. Yeah,
Oh,
I got it in 2021, so it was after the freeze.
mine died in the freeze and has not come back.
Yeah, well, it's
Where'd you get yours?
I got it from Cat Trailer.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, I noticed in your article that it was a Biflora that the bees were landing on the pictures.
Yes, yes. And I had more fritillary caterpillars on those vines than the fetida.
Well, it's interesting. I've seen fritillary caterpillars on it, and I wonder, what about the ants? And one day I saw a fritillary caterpillar that was crawling on the wooden fence. I said, I know what happened there. They chased it out.
Well, I noticed that the Biflora was much preferred by my caterpillars than the stinky. I've had the Biflora for a couple of years now. First ones I planted was 21, but I've had the stinky since 20, and it still has leaves this year right now, and there's very few leaves left on the Biflora.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you can't kill those things. I realize, their roots are powerful, so those things can eat all of the leaves off of it, and they'll come back. And I find it interesting that they've probably gone through history and their natural life being eaten up by these caterpillars, and then when they're eaten up by the caterpillars, it probably drives the roots to send out more rhizomes to send out plants in other places. I just my thought, and it just to me it's just fascinating the way Mother Nature balances things and the give and take, and what they can do in answer to these things. Anybody
Yeah,
else?
I also noticed though that I had a few big bees that looked like bumblebees, and they weren't your hairy tongue or feather tongue bee. They were all black.
Do you remember the picture I showed you of the carpenter bee, the big sumo wrestler carpenter bees? I'm guessing that's what you had.
Could have been. I wish I had gotten a picture of it, but it came for several times, and it sounded like a B-49 coming in or something.
Yeah,
It was really loud when it flew,
yeah,
almost like a hummingbird.
yeah. But look up carpenter bees, and you'll see that they're gigantic. There aren't that many of them, but they're gigantic. And
Yeah, I haven't
they do
seen
like
one now
squirrels.
for 2 years.
Yeah, I saw one in my passion vines a week ago, and I wanted to get a. I had a picture of it, as you noticed, but I wanted to get that picture of one in the passion vine, but I wasn't fast enough.
I understand. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Donna.
Yes, sounds
It's
great.
it's all yours. My time is up.
Thank you so much. It was very much enjoyed. Lots of positive comments, and yes, it made for a wonderful evening for us. So thank you. We'll have to hit you up. You may have some other secret things to tell us and inform us about in the future too. So thank you so much. Okay, with that, we will continue with the business meeting now and call the business meeting to order. Martha is here this evening and has agreed to do the minutes again. I want to welcome everybody who hung in here with us and hopefully enjoyed the presentation as much as I did. Um, if you received my mail out, I included the treasurer's reports. It's there for your review. We had a little bit of income from dues, and the only expense was our bat detector that was put to use in our recent outing to look at the bats. So that's come in handy already, and I'm sure we'll be using it some more. If there are other questions, Gail is probably here this evening. I think I saw her. If not, I was looking to see. Yeah, if there are no questions. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, yes, that's what I thought. I don't think anybody had any questions. I see Maria Pickens has her hand up. I'm not sure if that was for a question, Maria.
No, it wasn't. I was trying to support the presentation
All right.
because it was great.
It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So, yeah, and Katie Kraus, both with K's in her name, is watching with Stuart Warren. If we're wanting to take that note that she was in attendance. Okay, so the treasurer's report will be filed by audit, and if anybody has a question, I'm sure you can get hold of Gail, and she'll be glad to explain it to you. Minutes of the last meeting were also sent out, and those all looked good to me. If anybody has questions about those, you can bring it to our attention. And Elizabeth Eddy, thank you. I know you're here again tonight. Thank you for doing this last month. And I know Martha's taking minutes tonight, but we do appreciate you filling in. She was needing a break this summer. And if you can hang there in case she has to work late or something one evening, we'd appreciate your continued support. Thank you so much for helping out with these minutes. If there are no questions about the minutes, then we will file those and have them available for review. Under committee reports, Ronnie, as I said, had called me, and he wound up with a flat tire, but he was able to send me his monthly report. I didn't get it where I can pull it up on my email, but we had 117 hours entry eligible members. And as information, Martha, I forwarded these details to you in the email he sent me, so you don't have to write down all these and keep up with it. It'll be in the email to you. There were 32 unique members logged in. They logged service in 80 hours through 19 service opportunities. And again, 31 unique members logged volunteer hours and 21 unique members logged AT hours. And our impact data for July was 511 total approved service hours, worth an impact of $14,583.94. We had an impact on 273 adult and 106 youth, and a total of 35.25 approved advanced training hours. Okay. So with that, thank you, Ronnie, for sending those to us under the circumstances. Appreciate you pitching in and doing what you could. And I know you and James are both here tonight, and I know we're discussed having a class membership or a membership meeting in September early.
Right.
So
We have nothing new to report at this time. We will have more at the next general meeting because it will be after our education committee meeting. But Jim and I continue to work on this.
and hopefully some of you that showed interest in the upcoming class were able to view us on Facebook tonight. If you're still here, thank you for your interest, and keep checking in with us because we will be making some final decisions and getting things on board this fall for our spring class. So just keep watching for that, and you'll hear the latest if you tune into our meetings. Thank you for your interest. River, I think I did see you here tonight too. Do you have awards and recognition?
Yes, I do. And we'll start with the initial certification, Bill Rich. Yay, Bill.
Yes.
And thank you for that presentation. It was wonderful. Then we have 4 recertifications. Sophie, I can tell her on this meeting. Kathy Mawerton, yay. Tom Butler, Martha Jones, and Harry Jones. Woohoo! The 4 research for this month. We also have a 1,000 hour milestone, and that's Martha Jones.
All right, Martha.
Yay. And
See,
we
if you
have, I'm sorry?
if you hang around and take enough minutes, you'll pile up those hours.
Yeah, she will. Absolutely. And we have a 2,500 hour milestone, and that is Kathy Mawerton.
All right, Kathy.
Woohoo! Congratulations, everyone.
Congratulations. Thank you for that. Joseph, as webmaster, do you have anything you would like to report?
I've got some reports ready finally, showing what our some charts and stuff from our Facebook. Let's see. This is what we've done in the last 28 days. We're up 38% on our Facebook. I guess this is our page of people interacting in our private group. This is our public page. We're up 71% over the last previous month, which is really good. A lot of people are responding to and reading, especially Anita's blogs and the other blogs posts we've done lately. Moth Week and things like that have been especially popular. Let's see, I think that that got in there twice. Oh, that's about it on the website. Of course, if you've got any anything you want to include for the blog, send it to me or let me know. And also the other chapters newsletter is their deadline is I think the 20th. So if you have anything you want to submit to their newsletter that we do jointly with the Rio Grande Valley chapter, if you look for the email about that, or let me know when I can forward it to them if you can't find that. I think that's all I have for website.
Okay. Anita, you keep chugging out those blogs and articles. You want to tell us the latest thing you've been up to?
I don't know if you mentioned, but the deadline for the Chachalaca stories is the 20th. That's just 5 days. So get out your dictionary and your website or whatever, but get those articles, because I think that it's summer and I don't think she's got a lot of stories just yet. Anyway, I think a lot of that blog activity was from that really lengthy one that y'all helped send pictures for, was that plants in the cracks of the sidewalk. So that was pretty encouraging. But I know the AgriLife has a biannual lab. It's an abbreviation for I can't remember. Tony, jump in. What's that lab? Anyway, it's
Leadership Advisory Board.
tells you what kind of a leader I would be. I can't remember the name of the leadership. Anyway, he's not going to be able to go to the meeting this Friday, nor am I, but I had sent him some things for one of his reports. And just briefly, the stories and the blogs that I do write, the stories go to the McAllen Monitor the first and third Saturday of each month. And that's what the Muscovy will be about on this coming Saturday in the McAllen Monitor. My blog, I also market, if you will, with that expression, to the South Texas Border Chapter, and that's our sister chapter, 3 counties up.
South Texas chapter. We're the border chapter.
Oh, right. You're right. And Tony had to tell me how to spell it one time. But anyway, so the South, yes, okay. I'm so confused. The Friends of the Harlingen Hugh Ramsey Nature Park, the Rio Grande Valley chapter, and the South Texas Ecotourism Center, and then South Texas, which is the Kennedy, Kleberg, and Natchez counties. And let's see. And then Also, I've contributed so far 4 stories for the Chachalaca, only because I had a variety of pictures that I needed to talk about. And that's all I've done.
Sounds to me like you're busy enough, and I don't know about everybody else, but I think the evidence is there that we're all enjoying your blogs and articles. Thank you for your time and efforts doing that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the kudos.
Uh-huh. Okay. I think I saw Kathy Ton on here. Kathy, do you have any announcements you'd like to make? I know our annual meeting is coming up.
Yes, it's coming up in October, but they have not yet said if there's going to be a virtual meeting. They said by the 15th they would say something. So I'm hoping that tomorrow morning there'll be an announcement. Because I know a lot of our members would like to virtually due to the cost and the distance to Johnston as well.
Mhm.
So I'll keep you all posted.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Advanced training. We've been posting advanced training opportunities, and we've been hearing about them. And most of them have been the TMN Tuesdays, and any of those recordings that are on the state website can be watched for AT. You do not have to watch those live. You can watch them live, but you can also get AT credit for watching them recorded. And if anybody hears of other advanced training opportunities, let us know so we can share that with everyone. Susan Coleman, I know she's here tonight. I think about the only thing I had was Edinburgh World Birding Center was still possibly needing some helpers. And I know Estero is going to have a spooky night.
Science Festival.
The Safe
Spooky Science Fair.
October.
So,
Those are the only things I know about. I did attend that virtual meeting with our partners in the other chapter, talking about our partner organizations. Boy, they've done a lot of work on it already.
yeah.
I just sort of sat there in awe of all the work they've done, and I will, yeah, try to catch up to them. Maybe Anne and I will have a chance to. You attended some of the other meetings, did you not, Anne?
Well, I've been helping them with contacting
Okay.
centers in the valley. So I contacted Santa Ana and Benson.
Okay.
And when we contact these organizations, we're having them fill out a form asking them
Right.
kind of volunteer opportunities they have available for our Texas Master Naturalist.
So,
So
yeah,
soon that'll be completed. There'll be a meeting and a master list is going to go out. So that will be available to you.
it's very impressive. But the work that's being done is very, very good. I'll see if I can start helping in some way.
All right. I know she'd been doing
Everything
that.
they've got to offer, absorb all
Yeah.
the information, disseminate it.
I didn't catch that.
I said, all the information will be coming to you so you can
Right.
get it out to the members so that they can see what's available at each nature center, so they'll can contact them themselves and start volunteering.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very good
Okay.
then. Under old business, I wanted to just touch briefly. We had a red crowned parrot count, and I know Javier is on here, and I know he was involved with that. Javier De Leon, do you have anything to say about the parrot count?
No, it was hi everybody. It was a good parrot count, and we're looking forward to the next one in October. Thank you all for the volunteers that came out to McAllen and the volunteers in Westaco. So just keep an eye out for that. And, a quick plug for that Spooky Science Fest at Estero. That is October 22nd. So it happens to be the same weekend as the Master Naturalist statewide meeting. But for now, just save the date for the October 22nd Spooky Science Fest, and I'll send Susan the actual volunteer duties for that night a little later on.
Sounds good. Thank you. And Joseph, I know both you and Anita were involved a bit with Moth Week. If y'all want to talk about that a little bit.
Joseph, I think you're muted.
There it is. Okay, I should be unmuted now. So
Yes.
during Moth Week, John Brush realized we don't have a moth group on iNaturalist just for the Rio Grande Valley. So he set this up for us, which makes it a whole lot easier to look up what we're actually seeing here just in the valley. There weren't any area specific groups before. So that's over 1,000 species in the Valley of Moths. So this group has been really useful already. Let's see. And this is just from Moth Week. This is our numbers, 210 species or possible species. They haven't been made it to research grade, meaning somebody has agreed that that is the correct species. I've had 93. Anita had 129, and this next guy is Nestor. He came to 2 of our moth nights, and he's interested in becoming a Texas Master Naturalist maybe next year. So we talked to him a good bit and talked about what types of volunteering things we could do. And there's so many different things. It's not just moth nights. Susan does turtle patrols out at the beach and pulling grass at parks and giving presentations and like Bill just did to either us or to other groups. So if you're watching Nestor, there's lots of stuff. And let's see. This is if you're looking at just the research grade. During Moth Week, we had 89 confirmed species, 254 observations, and 17 people participating. This is just a picture from Quinta Mazatlan. I hadn't seen that many moths in so long. It was really surprising. It was just the right time. I guess the weather changed and we had a little bit of rain, I think a few days later. So maybe they were blowing in ahead of the storm. This was at Benson. No, this was at Estero because that's John Yoakum. And we had several TMN members there and a bunch of moths. This is Anita, the first time I got to go mothing with Anita, except we've been on mothing by email up until now, and Jennifer. And this is, we had a smaller group at Benson, but it was still fun. We had more kids this time. And then there's the last of Moth Week at Oleander Acres. Didn't have too many people, but we still had fun looking at moths. We also didn't have as many moths that time. You never know when you're going to have a good moth night. The beginning of the week was really good, and it just kind of went downhill. This is just one of the sphinx moths that we found, and a sulfur butterfly. And a black witch was really popular at Quinta. This was on a wine rope, which I'd never heard it done before. They soaked the rope in some sort of wine, and these moths aren't attracted to the light that much, but they are attracted to rotting fruit. And that's, I guess, that's what wine is, so they like it. And then this was my favorite moth. This is a type of slug moth caterpillar, or I mean a slug caterpillar moth. I knew that family right away just because the shape and the look, but he got away before I got to share him with too many other people. So if you missed him and you were there, that's what he looked like. I think that's all I've got for, oh, I do have one more. And mothing wasn't the only thing going on in July. The McKees, Cynthia and John were doing the Ode Olympics while I was doing, just before I was doing mothing. So they did a whole bunch, and you can read about that on our Facebook page and the group and on our blog.
Are those hairy legs on it, Joseph?
Yep. Yeah, he's got hair all over.
Wow. So what's the largest moth that we have in the valley? Is it that the black witch?
Probably. It depends on what you read. The black witch is considered by a lot of places the biggest in North America, or at least the United States. I'd say the Forbes silk moth is pretty high, pretty close up there.
It's got a 4-inch wingspan, but the black moth I think is 6 or 7, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking I've read 5 to 7.
on
So
the
yeah, I guess I
slip-
haven't actually looked at them side by side. So maybe the black witch moth probably is much bigger if those numbers are right.
There's
They're
a
both
lot of
pretty big.
stories associated with the black witch that I've heard that if it flies into four corners, that it forecasts death. If it flies
Yeah,
into
there's
four
a whole
corners of a house.
Only if
lot of
somebody's
death
sick
myths
in
on
the
that.
house.
The better versions of that myth and supposedly according to texasinto.net, there's a South Texas version of that myth that says if it gets into your house, you're going to win the lottery.
That's right.
And the version in Hawaii is you're going to come into money. So that's pretty similar and a whole lot better than the death versions.
And then you're going to die.
I took a picture of one very close to my door, but it didn't go in.
That's good.
That's
Or
okay.
bad
It's
if
still
you
luck. It
needed the
means
money.
good luck.
Yeah, I've had good luck lately.
All right.
Sold the house.
Oh,
That's
good. That
So you
excellent.
did come into
Days
money.
it was on the market.
By the way, when's the deadline to sign up for the Red Tide Rangers, Tony?
I think, I don't know if we have a deadline. We just got 28 slots for it.
Oh,
So
better
that's
better
on
hurry up
the
and sign up.
27th. And so you can call the Coastal Studies Lab at 4339, no, I forget the number. But you can look them up.
Okay.
There's a flyer on the Facebook page too for it. For the red
Yes,
for the to
that's
sign up for the Red Tide Rangers.
I think it's
Okay.
361-8236. I believe that's their number.
All
Certainly
right.
a worthwhile class to go to.
It is.
Okay. Thanks for that reminder. And that would be advanced training too.
That's right.
So, I see Elizabeth is still here. Elizabeth, can you tell us about next month's program?
Yes. Brain. I've got to put on my brain here. Tiffany Kirsten is going to be talking about her birding year and all that.
Yeah.
I can't remember the title. Do you remember, Joseph? I sent you the information about that, but it's been some weeks ago, and I've had way too many boxes to empty between here and there to remember the title of a talk.
Yeah, I don't remember
Anyway,
either.
yeah. Anyway, it should be interesting hearing about her birding year and seeing photos from that and all. So
Yeah, I had just seen that movie that they'd made a few years ago about the birding year and how crazy people go to try and get the counts and stuff, and then to find there was somebody in the valley who did that. I was really impressed. So we can look forward to that. Does I think the only other item I wanted to announce, I think we sent the information out over our listserv about the passing of Ron Rink. I know some of you may have seen him around. He's done a lot of the photography for a lot of our classes over the years. This was at Quintamont Salon. I think I spent the day with him at a booth there. And this poster that's in that picture is one he developed of all the, showing a bunch of the butterflies in the area. And so usually we go over to Quinta for their Monarch Fest. And so we attended that, and he was a valuable member, and he will be missed. And so keep Mary in your thoughts and prayers. She's been a member for quite a few years too, and I hope things are going well with her.
Is she going to come back down, Donna?
I have not heard.
Okay.
So we will find out. But yeah, so in the meantime, our next board meeting is going to be deferred, usually is the first Monday of the month, and that would be Labor Day, the night of Labor Day. So we're going to postpone it until the 12th, and our next general meeting is the 19th. Are there any other questions or comments?
I've got one more comment. We're going to have a second Red Tide Ranger Ranger training on September 27th. And it's going to be on using the HAB scope, which uses AI to identify the cells under a scope and count them. It's a lot easier than the standard method that we're going to be teaching next Saturday or that couple Saturdays from now.
All right. Thank you. Well, with that, tonight's count will be, we had a full hour for our program, which would be advanced training, and we've had right at a half hour, 0.50, for a half hour of our business meeting. So thank you everyone for participating, and we look forward to seeing you next month.